Hello everyone, so this is a continuation of the Guitar Notes game, and this is video number 4. And from video number 3 we were able to create everything and run it, but we were not hearing any sounds. What we wanted to do in this video is to debug, or to try to trace down where the error is coming from and see if we can get the problem and solve it so we can hear the sound. In the end of the video number 3, I quickly was trying to figure out what was going on, and I remembered that the audio player needs to have a scope of the entire view, and this is why we defined it in the header file over here. So I quickly moved the allocation, which is the instruction that creates the player in the memory, and then the instruction that initializes the player. I separated them and moved this to the view did load. However, this did not do any good and it did not really work. So I'm going to take it back to where it was. So I'm going to press Ctrl X to cut it from the view did load and take it back to where it was earlier in the play sound. But still I don't have a sound playing and I don't know what's going on. It seems to me that I got everything right. So let's debug the program. So I'm gonna make it a full screen here, or the single screen. And debugging the program, Xcode comes with a very powerful debugger. A debug means you take control of the timing of execution of the instructions and gain an insight into the effect of each one of the instructions, and it gives you an opportunity to determine if the results of each instruction is the same. What's going on right now is that when we run the app, everything runs at the same time. When we use the debugger and start to break that down, we can take it a step at a time and examine the different data and the different variables and each instruction. To add a breakpoint, you go to the gray area next to the line number and click in that area, and you see this blue arrow. It indicates a breaking point. What I'm informing Xcode by doing this is that I want Xcode to execute everything until it is time to execute this instruction. When such time comes, I want you to stop and give me the control, and I will tell you what to do. That's basically what the breakpoint is doing. So make a breakpoint and then let's run. So here is the first screen. Click help, goes to the second screen. I know that play sound comes when we hit the enter, or click on a button. So I clicked on a button, and you see there is a breakpoint, and there is a green highlight to highlight the line of instruction where we stopped. I'm going to bring the the output screen to the top, and as you can see, it lists here the different variables or the different memory locations and give you an idea of what's going on in there. So at this point, there's a memory location for self, and this is the memory address of that self. But if you open self, you see all the variables inside. So here is player, and as you can see, it is nil. There's nothing in there. Here's the sender, and there is a sender actually because the sender has been received. And you open the sender when we know that this is a UI button. So here is the title view, UI button label, and here's, you can expand each one of them and look at all the different values if you can. Some of them just give you the memory address, so you can't really tell what's going on in there, but here you are. And the self itself has a view controller that tells you here is the address of the bundle, and we're going to get a reference to that bundle and different things in here. This is all what's inside the view controller, which is loaded to us by the library. To move one step forward, you have control over here. This control means that you want to continue program execution. This one meaning step over the instruction. And this one means step into the instruction. So if it's like a message call, it goes inside that message, and step out of the instruction. Step over is the one we're going to use to move one step at a time, and keep an eye on the output screen to see what is happening. So I moved the first one, which gave me a reference to the app bundle, and here is the address of the app bundle. And this is where the app is stored on your computer. Since this goes under the simulator in the application support, so you can copy this and go to the Finder if you want to open that particular folder and see what's inside. Then the file name is now a reference has been created, and we can continue step over that, and we can see now that the file name has the value A. You see here that it grabbed the text as an A, and this is my app bundle. Now I need to see the file path, which should be my app bundle /a.mp3. So the file path as a string is correct and should be pointing to a.mp3, which is the file that I want to play. Now we move to the URL. So the next step is the URL, and the file URL came out to be nil. So that is probably why I can't play, because the file URL should have the same as my file path. So I'm using this message that says URL with a string, and I'm passing that string to it, but apparently that is not generating a URL correctly. So you can go to the URL NSURL documentation and see where that is coming from. And if you notice, I was going to use init from the previous project, initialize a URL with a content with that string. If I go to window and go to organizer, actually not organizer, if I go to window and help and go to documentation and API reference and type in, here is NSURL, I already have it, the NSURL reference and the different tasks. So I want to look at the creating NSURL, and here is some description of what you do, how you can create that. And the different methods in here. And to create a URL, there is a URL with a string or init with a string. A URL with a string has a plus next to it, meaning that you can call that method using the class name, so you don't need to do an allocate. Init with a string requires that you allocate an object in memory first before you can call that message. So URL with a string did not give us what we're looking for, so maybe we should try init with a string. So go back here, and I'm going to replace this one with init with a string. So I'm going to take all of this out, and I'm going to allocate an NSURL. And then on the allocated, I'm going to say init with a string, or init file URL, referencing a local file, or the init file URL with path. That's the one we want, file path, and use the file path as my string. Init file URL with path. So let me run this to the end and click the A again and step over, and notice the file names. Now let's see what happens to the URL. It's not gonna respond because this change is not on the app, so I have to stop and run again. For a moment I thought that the debugger will redeploy and use the changes. So now here is the file URL, and as you can see it has the same name as the string, but as a file URL with the file : / and then followed by the path, which is where my audio player is, and then continue to the end, and here you can hear the sound, the B, and continue to the end, here the B. I no longer need that, it is working fine. But in the debugger you see the memory, you see the CPU, and continue, and so on. So the app is working and playing sound, and we use the breakpoint and the debugger to discover that the message we were using to create the URL was not actually working, and we use the help or the documentation to find other options and make the correction or use a different message and so on. Very few people know, or as a beginner you will not know what message to use from the first time. Once you figure out the task that you want, you will probably ask or read in a book or research that, but also you can use trial and error and the documentation to read about what each task or what each message is doing and try to learn the difference between each one of them and describe. What I did here is I removed the breakpoint. So I'm going to stop the program, go back to the folders, and to make sure that everything is running, I completed the help view. You click the help, you see a description, you see sounds, and you can hear the sound and know how each note sounds like, so that when we go in the game you're able to play to answer the correct answer. I only did A through D. You need to add in the project D# through G#, because the project, the help need to have all the buttons. So you need to complete the other buttons as I explained in module number 3. Thank you, and in the next video we will start building the game by adding the start game and play a random sound.